Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to IISS on this rather intriguing day in the life of the British political system. It's good that, notwithstanding that, we've got a very respectable turnout for this event. My name is Nigel Inkster. I'm the Director for Future Conflict and Cybersecurity at IISS, and it's my pleasure to chair this presentation by, I guess we have to now call you Commander Retired, Mak Chishty.
Something like that, yes.
Anyway, Commander Chishty, as the invitation to this makes clear, former senior officer in the Metropolitan Police, I think the most senior Muslim in the Metropolitan Police, and very retired on Tuesday after a very distinguished full career during which he was involved in various forms of policing, both criminal detection, but also latterly in community policing, where I think it's fair to say he has been responsible for introducing some pioneering approaches. We're particularly fortunate, in a somewhat macabre way, that Commander Chishty is available to speak to us at a time when the issue of community policing has really risen to the top of the agenda as a result of recent terrorist attacks in the United Kingdom, in Manchester, and more recently here and in London. And the question of how to do this, have we got it right? Could more have been done? How do you get community policing to help you identify terrorists who haven't done anything until the moment they decide they're going to? This I think shapes up to be a very promising and interesting event. It is all on the record, so no inhibitions there. And I think without further ado, Mac, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming. I think I may stand because it might be easier.
As you like,
at least I can.
This is your auditorium now.
This is see me at the
sure.
At the back of the room. So can I just check that everybody can hear me? Thank you very much. It's just that I had a pretty awful experience a few months ago when I was doing a talk, and halfway through the talk, a lady at the back said, "Can you speak up? I can't hear you." And the lady at the front said, "I can hear you perfectly well."
Yeah.
We'd like to swap. You've heard that one before, obviously. Okay, yeah, right. I'm going to talk about, if we can have some humour in this serious and quite depressing subject, then that would be good. But I can tell you something that, in the last 2 years, we've had 13 attacks that have been foiled across the country. And then since the 22nd of March, we've had 5 attacks that have been foiled, and there were actual attacks that we were prevented by security and the police, and unfortunately 3 attacks that took place, and all 3 touched me in a very personal way in different ways. So like ex-colleagues in the room, I was working at Scotland Yard at the time, and although we respond to a lot of emergencies, you have the reporting your response. It's something different when it takes place in front of you. So just outside my window, I could see hordes of people running, and the expression on their faces of confusion, fright, fear was quite stark, and London had come to a standstill. So we knew something was going on. First we thought, well, actually, it could have been a road traffic accident. You don't automatically assume it's a terrorist attack, but unfortunately it was a terrorist attack. The second one was in Manchester. I was actually on call, so I was on London as a commander, on-call responsibility, so I was actually on duty and I got the call. And what struck me about this was when I got the call, I was told there was potentially 3 suicide bombers. You never know exactly what the score is, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't really backpack, shrapnel, etc. And then I asked how many people had been injured or killed, and there's 4 fatalities. And I remember by the time I walked from the phone in the lounge to the door where I was going to get changed and go out, my phone rang again and said, "Sir, it's 20 people who've been killed, and that is something that really stops you. And of course, last Saturday we had the London Bridge and Borough Market attack. And yes, we can talk about the skilled and courageous effort by police who were on duty, and I won't take anything away from that. I think, highest regard, and I'm really impressed with the means we got there and we neutralised the threat. But the question that I'm going to try and answer is actually, how do we get to a position where the risk is mitigated to begin with? And some of the things you may have heard me say in the past, and certainly I said on my penultimate day, was about actually Muslim communities needing to do more. I won't ramp that up too much today because hate crime has gone up. There's a sentiment which is negative towards Muslim communities, and I just don't want to. Push that. But there are certain things that we need to talk about. And what I'm going to do today, I'm going to try and paint the complexity of the Muslim community. I'm going to talk about how we can engage in that, how we can mobilise some of their support, why some of the conditions that exist in the community at the moment give rise to people wanting to join extremist organisations, and then finish off on some of the things that we can do. And I'll try and do that in about 20-25 minutes with your permission, if I may. Okay, so one thing that's not really understood, my policing career and working with partnership with lots of different people, including government, I don't think people really get what Muslim communities are about. One thing that they see is actually visibly you can tell a Muslim normally, especially if they've got the beard, the hat, or the veil. But they're not homogenous. They are completely different types of people. In fact, there's 16 strains of sects and denominations, and often they're ill bedfellows. They don't get on with each other. There's a lot of tension within that. So it's wrong of us, from our perspective, to think that actually we're just dealing with the Muslim community. We're not. What we're trying to do is actually to try and engage with the Muslim community. We've got to be able to show understanding, have trust. Trust is a key word. We've got to build relationships, and we've got to be able to have some sort of working arrangements with Muslim communities. Because you've heard me say, and I'm on record in saying it, actually, the danger, the silent killer, lurks within the Muslim community. And I know people get sensitive about that, but he actually does, and I think we should face up to that. I think trust is important, and engagement facilitates that. But engagement is, from my own experience over the last 5 or 6 years, is actually hard-earned. You just can't do that. So today I'm talking to you, I'm not engaging with you. I say this to my colleagues, this isn't engagement, because you don't really know me, you don't know who I am, you don't trust me, you don't know if I'm going to keep my promises, you don't know what sort of person I am, you don't know my values. All I'm doing is speaking to you. Hopefully you'll engage with me at some point doing this, but this is an engagement. And the reason I make this point is to senior police officers is we often get called to lots of big events, lots of communities, and we go there, we give awards, we celebrate with them, and then we're out the door, and we think we've engaged. Engagement is a two-way process where you can have a dialogue between people, and people trust you. I think that to actually understand Muslim communities, you've got to understand how different they are. And Muslim communities are exceptionally different because they are based upon a number of criteria. I'll just try and point what they are. First of all, their religion origins and orientations are completely different. Secondly, their cultural traditions inform how they live their lives. The denominational self-identification. So I may be a Sunni, or I might be a Sufi, or I might be a Wahhabi, I might be a Salafist. And I hear lots of people saying, well, actually Wahhabism is a problem, or Salafism is a problem. But there's a quietist nature in there where you can have your views, but you don't take any actions. So are we dealing with violent extremism or just extremism? Where are we around this? And when we have opened up these discussions, there's not a lot of understanding or answers within that. So then you get more nuanced stuff in relation to those things, where local customs and practices play a role in driving behaviours. And this is sometimes built upon the retention of networks and relationships about clan, about caste, about, you may have heard the word blasri, about, the familial structure. and it's very insular as well. So a family that's got an insular structure where their beliefs and their norms are about early teenage marriage, business within the family fraternity, not being open to inviting other people, even if you're of the same race, the same country, where unless you're from that tribal district, you can't get in. And then you've got your religion on top of that. Okay? And then what you get is you get the historical factors flowing through that as well. And we've got to understand what's happening with these historical factors and why certain things are changing. I'm not saying they're wrong or right, but the world is changing. So there's the evident rise of Salafism, particularly within African communities. And within those African communities, the biggest rise is within young women of that form of Islam. And the question has to be, why is that occurring, so we understand it? The decline of traditional Sufism, more mystical, more softer, more melodic. I am one of those, but it's obviously declining. The great emergence of quietist Wahhabism, playing more of a central role in things. The proliferation of Deobandi thought, which is linked to grassroots evangelistic groups taking that message out. How does that affect anything? You know, we talk about, well, how are all these views taking place, how they're circulating. But what do we know about that? And then there's the existing hardening attitudes of Barevi Muslims. So I'm trying to just point out a journey where it's not a simple concept. There's difficulties within this. And then if that's not hard enough, you then have a look at, it's compounded by the intergenerational gaps and also the crisis of identity within Muslim communities. First generation, like my mum and dad who came here, I think they had a temporary mindset. I thought they'd come here, they're lucky to be here, and at some stage they'll go back home having earned a little bit of money and make a life back home. But I think what happened was unconsciously that they had me, so they had the children, we got settled in, and before they know it, they were permanent residents. But I don't think they actually realised that temporary mindset, but in reality they were permanent. And then you had the second generation, people like me come along where, and I can remember living two different lifestyles. There's a Western life at school, then going home, there's a very traditional, I wouldn't say Muslim life, Pakistani life, a Pakistani life, more than that. But I do remember my mum and dad, if I'm really honest with you, talking about the virtues and the values of this country. And they didn't use values, they didn't use British values, they didn't use any of that slogan. But what they said was, what was great about the UK, and we should always remember this, is actually you get justice, you get protection, you get health, you get opportunity, you get education. And I get all of this stuff impregnated in me, where I think actually they're right. So it's about respecting that and not about abusing those things. But the first generation tried to cling on, in my opinion, to the way they knew their norms and customs. They didn't want to lose that identity. Second generation, like me, tried to conform in a way where we took the best of both worlds, but not everybody did. Some second generation people have tried to just replicate what their parents were like. And the third generation, I think in the third and fourth are in a completely different arena at the moment, where they're struggling to find who they are. And I'll come on to where that's taken them. And in a struggle to find their identity, I think that's where they've been moved into a stronger Islamist format. I think when you put all of that together, it almost seems that the Muslim community in itself is spiralling into a crisis at the moment. And I think some of the things that it needs is clear leadership, it needs some direction, and it needs some help and support in that regard, which my call for senior Muslim leaders to grip some of this is based upon that. Otherwise, it's just rolling and tipping over all the time. Where you have got Muslim speakers to actually put their foot on the ball and understand exactly how the Muslim community it seems to be toppling over. Instead of addressing the issues, it seems to be based upon activism where they want to talk about and defeat the Prevent programme. You know, they may have some justice, they may not, but in the overall scheme where your community is spiralling out of control, Is that the only thing you can pick up? Is that the only thing you can think of? Or they want to talk about the title British values. Let's talk about values. Let's not talk about British values, as if in some way it's an insulting phrase to use. Or let's talk about the role of foreign policy. That may or may not be justified. Or let's talk about how Western ideals are corrupting their way of life as Islamic people. So I don't think any of those are doing any favours at all. I just don't think they're doing any favours. They're missing the point, and they're not getting to the heart of where we are. So within all of that, what we seem to find is a number of people who are conflicted, and the intensity around that's growing. They don't seem to find a sense of belonging in one place or another, and they're seeking out that self-identification. What can they identify themselves with? What identity can they reach onto? And in doing that, I think the conditions on the ground make them really amenable to be just picked off into something. And then when they are picked off, they try and find their identity in Islam, but they just don't want Islam as in the normal Islam, because as a Sufi they want to show prominence and power. They want to show their obedience to the Almighty. They want to show their belief systems, how strong they are, better than everyone else. So they almost pull towards the harshest, literalist interpretation of Islam to show that we don't watch television, we don't integrate, we're absolutely Islamic, and this is us, like this. And what that does do then, that creates barriers of integration, of absolute integration, because you're not going to be able to do that. So when they're in that mindset, along comes, it's almost like a solution waiting for a problem to come along, a ready-made solution. Well, here's a caliphate, and they can relate to that. In that caliphate, you've got a cause which is driving, and that cause seems to agree with their grievances around that. They seem to, because this is caliphate, because it's based on religious scripture, they seem to have almost a legitimacy around that. We can do this. You're all wrong. We're a bit righter. Look at us. We're sturdy. Legitimises their process. And it's almost coming together, belonging to, that's caliphate, a brotherhood, a clan, coming together with that group identity, which gives them more power. But more so, it gives them self-determination, and it gives them the power that they're after, and respect. And it moves them from being a victim and now becoming the victor. Pristine Islam, I am this, look at the way I dress, look at the way I perform, and this is my values, a bit better than even other people. So when you have conditions like that, and we've had, like I said, since the 22nd of March, in the last 9 weeks, we've had 3 terrorist attacks. People have been blown up, people have been mowed over, people have been stabbed to death. One of my own colleagues was stabbed to death doing his job. I think we need a sea change. I think we need to have a shift in change. And that's why the day before I left, I had a number of Muslim leaders with me. You may have seen the news coverage on that. I did not want to be reading that statement. I don't know if any of you saw that, but outside Scotland Yard, I did not want to be reading the statement. But a statement was done. It was done by all of us, and it basically said, actually, for those 3 people who were involved in London Bridge, it wasn't like a lone actor. 3 people. There must have been some attack planning. There must have been some conversation. There must have been somebody who knew about that. Why wasn't that reported? And the Muslim community stood up and said, actually, this is a question to ourselves. We've got to now have a look at why nobody came forward. Why wasn't that reported? Because it's about saving lives. The reason I read it and they didn't, because I think actually if you speak out in the way that they were doing, and they seem to be speaking out, they could be subjected to a campaign of attack against them. Verbal attack, abuse online, calling them the kafir and everything else. So there's a question here about how much support, how sturdy are these people who want to talk out. There's one thing asking them to talk out, but you just can't let them do it without giving them the necessary infrastructure and support so they feel courageous enough to do it around that. The national model, as you know, is around counter-terrorism, and it's something that I've been saying for some time. So what's happened is, and I don't know if everybody has observed it in the clarity that it should be, but in terms of countering terrorism, I think this country, we are pretty strong. We always have been. We've got Unfortunately, we've got years of history. The way the policing service works with the intelligence agencies, the way it locks in with government. I saw it 3 times in the last 9 weeks. It is a pretty good machine. We lock in, we respond, we do really well around that. And the contest strategy, which is the 4 Ps, as you're probably aware, it works pretty well, I think. And then on this side of the house, you have something called the CVE, Counter-Violent Extremism, and we've got a CVE strategy by government, which came out October 15. And within that, we've got, I think, less developed ideas, less developed infrastructure, less developed strategies around that. And I don't think it's enough to just say we need to develop a counter-narrative. Because if you have a counter-narrative and you develop one, and you try and put that against the complexity of what I tried to just paint today, it's not going to stick, it's not going to work. It needs a different approach. So, without depressing you all too much, if I'm honest with you, we've got complexity, we need a bit more ideas. There are communities, my practice experience where I've worked with communities for the last 5 or 6 years in London, there's a number of communities that we can work with who want to work with us. I think one of the most progressive communities, maybe one of the most newly arrived communities, is our Syrian community. Yeah, you know, and some of the things they are asking for is quite simple. They've said to me, Mr. Chishty, can you help us integrate? And I said, well, I can, but how can I help you? And they said, can we just have a short list of notes of what it's like? What can we expect if we knock on somebody's door to ask them? If we say hello to somebody in the street, what's the reaction? If we see somebody with lots of shopping bags, if we go over to help them, what's the reaction can we have? Because we want to do that. And from the areas in which our Syrian communities live, the reports I've had back is actually their presence has enhanced that neighbourhood, so they're really welcome. And they've not been here that long. I'll just move on to my own community, the British Pakistani community, which has been there for 3 or 4 decades, and I relate that to the Louise Casey report, and I think she's actually on point in this regard, is actually every generation seems to be like the first generation, which means that community, and I know it hasn't integrated, hasn't progressed, hasn't moved forward, and we've got to ask the question why. And it's an important community because it's the largest populace of Muslims in this country. They should have a Sufi background to them, and they should be following that. So you and I should ask the question, then actually out of the 700 people who have gone to Syria and joined and Iraq and joined ISIL, why have 30% of those been Pakistani? Because there's a discourse it doesn't naturally go together. I think the Somali community, what I like about the Somali community is they're honest and they've got the courage to look in the mirror as to what's really going on. So especially around street and gang violence, around tribalistic issues, around knife crime, and they themselves are saying this is our problem. Can you help us with this? As opposed to denouncing or kicking back and accusing everybody else of it's their issue. They're actually acknowledging that. I think the Bangladeshi community, Tower Hamlets, it's a large proportion in Sylheti, hasn't moved on, but there's people within that community coming forward and saying we've got to provide young people with and make them into leaders of the future. And I've worked with some of the enterprising leadership groups around there, and you know I was surprised and delighted to see almost 50 young Bangladeshi people studying at Oxford University. And what does that say about that? But where we could do a lot better is how to surface, how to express that. So it just brings joy and brings delight, and it gives other people the inspiration to follow suit. The Sudanese community equally want a cooperative approach with authorities, want to know more, want to understand why the rules and regulations, although they've been here some time, they just don't know. So when it comes to safeguarding and child issues, in their country what they report to me is the child's theirs, not the state's. So sorry to extend the point, but this is what they say to them, saying that they can love them, they can beat them, they can make them work all day, they can kill them, it's their child. So when we come in here and say, actually, why hasn't your child gone to school? They think, what's it got to do with you? And literally, I've had some basic conversations where they turn around and say, well, actually, nobody told us. For this one, nobody told us. It goes to the Somali my community as well? No, I didn't realise my child had to go to school. Is that my responsibility, or is it your responsibility? So I think we've missed some basic things that we've taken for granted, and I can understand why. But I do think that they're important to do that. Overall, taking for far too long, people haven't really called it what it is. This type of extremism, for whatever reasons, and I've painted some of those, is germinating within and across the Muslim community. Yeah, political correctness or fear of upsetting people hasn't allowed a dialogue to take place where we can say that. Okay, maybe I'm more comfortable and more confident in being able to say that because I'm British Muslim Pakistani. I'm part of that community. Maybe I can call it. But even then, when I have said things, I know how vicious the attack can be, and I can understand why people won't want to say that at all. Not just people who aren't Muslims, but Muslims themselves. I've sat on mosque floors, and they're saying exactly the same as me, but they will not stand up and say it. And I can't turn around and say, please do that, because I know how fearful they are. So we've got to be able to do with that. That's the responsibility for us and the state to do that. Last year sometime I did an article where all I said was really, if I'm honest with you, is actually it's about your private space. It's about you being more aware, more vigilant in your home. So if your child starts to develop a different persona, is all of a sudden quiet or saying the wrong things, you might just want to investigate. And it could be your child's being groomed, bullied, not feeling well, or it could be he's becoming or she's becoming radical, and we've seen that. And what was wrong with saying, actually, understand that? Because if we all do that, then the opportunity and the space for terrorism to get in is constricted. That's the point I was making. But I had, as a result of saying that, and I'll say it again, I don't regret anything I said. There's some children coming back from school who are saying, actually, Christmas is Iran. It's sacrilegious, it's against Islam, but it's not. Ask the question, where did your child get that from? If my child was coming home and they were saying, had racist connotations, I'd be saying, actually, what are you saying about black people, Pakistani people? You'd ask that question. And there's this awful thing about, where people think they are in protest trying to ban going to different stores. So I talked about Marks and Spencer's, and I did say that somebody who stops shopping at Marks and Spencer's, you might want to ask the question. It could be service is bad, the size isn't fit, it's too expensive. Yeah? And that's fine. But if your loved one came home and said, I'm not going to shop there anymore, and you said, well, why is that? And they said, well, actually, it's Zionist and the preacher down the road told me. You might just want to be able to get in there first and just ask and correct that view or help them understand that. So, having made those points, what happened to me? So what did I face? Okay, so I had an onslaught of attack by Muslim leaders and organisations. They wrote to the Nationals and said, does the Commissioner of Sir Bernard Hogan agree with me or not? It's almost challenging the two of us. There's 50 organisations which wrote to the Commissioner asking me to be removed or dismissed. There was formal complaints that went into the IPCC that I should be investigated. So if that could happen to me, and I had the institutional support at that time, you can understand that if you're just, as I say, Joe Public or Mohammed somebody or another, you can understand how difficult it's going to be. And this fear thing, this intimidation, has reduced the prospect of real debate. But with 3 terrorist attacks, with people maimed and killed, time has come to step up a gear and actually grip this problem. So when you get a lot of Muslim people and they do a good job, I finish on this point, standing up and what they're doing is condemning that attack. I've said this as well before. It's easy to condemn something bad. I'm going to condemn this attack. It's a horrible thing. These extremists. The feedback I'm getting, the feedback I was getting up until Tuesday when I left work, was actually, we don't believe you. It's hollow. We don't believe you. We want to see action. We want to see deed. We want to see something else. It's not landing anymore. So you get that as a risk factor coming forward. When Westminster happened, we got into the public space and we stood together, the big campaign, we stand together, we kept the community together. It becomes harder. Equal effort went into Manchester. A lot of effort up until Tuesday because I was driving that, did myself personally. But hate crime has gone up by about 500%. We've got the performance analysts in the room for the Met today. 500 is it?
The highest rates of Islamophobic hate crime ever in 20 days after.
Yeah. Right. And I'm not talking about the far right. Let's call it. I'm not talking about the extreme right. I'm talking about the middle ground here, where this hurt, this pain, is turning into an anti-feeling, and that is turning into. I hope it doesn't go more into eventual feeling, because we want to keep communities together. So, and the only way, I'll finish off on this point, the only way we're going to be able to do that, ladies and gentlemen, is by supporting one another, by calling it what it is, having an honest discussion, analysing it, not trying to take, plastic acid at all in any way whatsoever, and understanding it's difficult, it's complicated, and not being too simplistic about this. That's what we have to do. So on that note, I'll just say that actually when people say to me, what we need is a counter-narrative, we probably do. But I think that's well down the train. We need a lot more before that. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much, please. There was a lot to unpack there, particularly in terms of the complexity of the problem that we face in this country. It reminds me of the immediate aftermath of the 2005 London bombings, where the cry went up around the political community in Westminster, where is the Islamic community? And of course, that goes to your point about there is no such thing as the Islamic community. It's a complex and textured mosaic. And actually, the answer was, as it became apparent, that the Muslim community in Britain was actually, out, supporting their local football team, shopping at B&Q, doing all sorts of things that normal British people do. The fact that slightly got overlooked in the rush. But I think it is, it was some of the things that you've just said gel very much with another speaker that we recently had, Professor Gilles Capel from Sciences Po, who made the point that the purpose of these jihadist attacks, and a very clear purpose, is to stir up intercommunal hatred to the point where it might actually fall over into civil conflict, civil war. So there is a real issue here, and the kind of backlash effect of multiple terrorism attacks is something that has always been a major preoccupation in terms of what that could do with communal relations. Well, we've got the commander for another 25 minutes, and I'm sure there are lots of questions that you want to ask. So I'm going to shut up and leave you to do the work. Could you, please tell us when you ask a question who you are.
Thank you. I'm Virginia Pomoni, Senior Fellow for Security and Development here at the Institute. Commander, thank you very much. That was fascinating. I just like to ask you two questions. You've hinted at the shortcomings of the CV strategy. I was wondering whether if you unpack that, and if you could tell us what the main barriers have been so that the CV strategy will become on the par of contests in terms of effectiveness. And the second point, you also mentioned the rise of Salafism among African communities, especially among young females. Can you give us more details about that?
Right. I think with the CV strategy, what I'm saying there is, we've got the strategy, but I think the movement to drive it has been underdeveloped. So I'm not criticising any part of it. I just think we need to put some stuff in there. You heard me talk about CT, where there's a lot of infrastructure support. It's well oiled. We get there, and you saw that. If we all have a look at what CVE is about, I think that space is more empty. And I think some of that there's been a lot of people scratching their heads as to what to put into that space. There's been discussions about trying to define extremism and what does that mean. There's been these issues about civil liberties, freedom of speech, and what's offensive, what's not. And I would be just saying, cutting through all of that, get to the core. What does this mean? There's people here who are turning extremists. It jars against what our values are about, jars against how we want to live our lives, and involve the community in that. So, for example, you saw some of these Dawa stalls where you saw the ALM things where they're saying some stuff which isn't illegal, but it's pretty unsavoury. And sometimes policing powers are limited, but the community can make it very, very obvious that this isn't welcome. It's not part of their values. They don't want it in their backyard. They can start dealing with that, as opposed to pedestrian walking past and just not engaging with it. So I'd like to see that. In terms of Salafism, well, a lot of people seem to blame Salafism. I'm not off that ilk because I work with a lot of Salafi institutions and people, and their interpretation of it is actually back to the first 3 generations and trying to be as close to the authentic form of Islam. It's when some of that tips into, actually, this is the only form of Islam, and anything else is not Islam, and you get that firing up. That's the part we've got to watch. And also we can use the community who's off that denomination to help us, because Salafi mosques have a network, largely African. We can work within those communities and get those messages out there. But there is a growing trend, and I don't know why, especially within the Somali community, of young girls. I think it's about 30% of those going into Salafism is 30% is represented by young girls, and where Salafism, one part of Salafism is a harsher environment especially for women and girls. The question mark, and I don't know the answer to this, is why would you be drawn to that unless you pick up some of the analogy or the analysis I've tried to give. Thank you. I think there's a question here.
Yeah. So. Could you tell us who you are, please?
My name is Ken Lee from Chinese Embassy.
Hello.
In your remark, you mentioned prevent strategy.
Yes.
So, in your opinion, how effective is strategies?
Well, there's a lot of commentary about prevent. The journey of prevent is this. I think there was something called Operation Champion in the West Midlands Police around 2010. It's going to be around that. Where there's about 216 cameras. And I think what they did there was wrong. They've since apologised. They'd put cameras up in areas, heavily dominant, prominent Muslim areas, funded by CT money, if it's in the Muslim areas and it's CCTV, without telling the Muslim community into those areas. So it was, in effect, a form of spying. They were never switched on. They were bagged over immediately. They worked with the community, and then they were removed. And there's a lot of public money that was wasted on that. But I think we should be able to forgive that, saying actually we've learned through that. I also know that of personal experience of how effective preventers worked in many, many cases. I know that you can get several thousands of cases where it's engaged. I know personal cases. I know cases which aren't even Muslim, where you've had English families turn around and say, prevent's really helped me because my son or my daughter was going to become radicalised and converted. So it has helped there. I think there's and I think it's irresponsible where people are saying that it's toxic, it's ineffective, because what that's doing is deterring people from getting the support that they need, because it's the only program out there. Every time I've engaged in that conversation, and I am no longer a serving police officer, but my views will always be the same because that's how I feel. Every time I've engaged with these people and said, well, okay, let's improve it. What have you got? I've asked that question. It's been empty cup of space. There's been nothing there. I've had no suggestions coming forward whatsoever. And things that have been thrown at me are the one or two examples in the public domain about the cooker bomb, things like that. And I'm not allowed to go into all the details, but there's a whole set of circumstances behind that, and Prevent weren't even involved in those cases. there was child safeguarding issues around that. So they're very well misinformed. It's almost as if they want to do away with Prevent and then start to celebrate that they've had an accomplishment, a victory over government strategy. And this deadlock of fight, in the middle of all that, my point is actually you're harming communities. Your drive and your obsession to attack and do away with Prevent, and you're missing out the bigger strategic picture where people need it. Of course, even amongst that, there's always been the offer by me and senior colleagues and government officials to say, okay, help us, work together, we'll improve it. But that hasn't come forward. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Quite, thank you so much. Charles Vivian, a member of the Institute. Quite, thanks so much. You really articulated so many of the issues very clearly. And judging, following from what you said, it seemed to me there are actually two separate issues. One is developing the integration of the Muslim community into the British community,
yes,
as it is.
Yes.
And secondly, and that's long term, and secondly, more short term, is actually developing an intelligence system in relation to the jihadi or whatever one calls it activity within the country. Clearly, what you're saying about developing the integration of the Muslim community into the British community is in place, in hand, and it will be developed. And of course it is, as Michel Hussein so clearly said, it is a two-way process of engagement. It's not just engagement from the British community, it's engagement with the Muslim community. But on the second one, it would seem to me that developing the intelligence requires the special branch and others from the lowest base of community policing up to the sources. Are you happy that the community policing is sufficiently robust and sophisticated and developed to develop the sort of intelligence which you're needing on the front line?
Yes and no.
Right. Spoken like a true public servant.
Yes and no. Yes, in terms of actually, we've got the best policing model in the world. We've got community-based policing. We're in communities, and the whole idea of community-based policing is to have that local, familiar, trusted face within neighbourhoods that people can go to. Okay. So yes, in terms of that. No, I don't think the capabilities there, the understanding in this arena is as well as it should be, and I think that's a learning curve. But I also think that neighbourhood policing has been, I wouldn't call diluted, but it's been affected over the last few years, where capacity-wise, it's not as visible, as present in numbers that are required in those neighbourhoods at the moment. And that's been for a number of reasons. There could be good reasons, partly to do with cuts, public service cuts, but choices have had to be made. Because ultimately, and I'm not saying this has happened, but if I was a chief constable and I had a choice, and my only two choices were having somebody in the car to respond to an urgent need for a 999 call, somebody at risk of death or injury there or then, or having somebody in the neighbourhood, and those are the choices that some chief constables have had to face. So I think we've got the system, we've got the model, we're very well versed in this with Pelian principles. I think we need to invest in it though. That's what I think. Intelligence-wise, I think that it can be very daunting for somebody to pick up the phone and ring the police, because they don't understand what's behind that telephone call. They don't know how it's going to get interpreted, what their position is going to be. And I think we have to be a lot more informative and open and explain to people that we are people, we'll talk you through this, and give them reassurances in non-technical jargon. You know, I heard myself on the TV saying the other day, oh yes, and anonymity will be assured. I think, why have I just said that? Yeah. It's totally confidential. Phone our terrorist hotline. That's my institution. I'm thinking, why did I just say all these things today? I try and use language that is, in a way, more common. So just normal language I'm trying to use. I think that gets received very well. When I use language that the corporate language, I don't think it doesn't land the points as well as otherwise. So there's some cultural things that we need to work through.
Actually, I wonder if I can abuse my privilege as chairman to intervene and ask a follow-up question there, Mac, which is this. At the moment, we in the UK have got 43 police forces.
Yes.
Is this actually too many? Would we not be better off having, maybe 7 or 8 larger regional forces which could benefit from economies of scale and integration of specialisations?
My views, I totally agree with you. I think that it was 2007, 2008 when we tried to go to the strategic force model, which is effectively regional policing, and it didn't work out for political reasons, for legal reasons. But I would support that. I always say that you don't have to be in a neighbourhood to protect the neighbourhood, so you don't need all the capabilities in one force, because thankfully outside of London, serious crime, complex crime, major crime, the rate of murder is low. We're a safe country. But you don't have to build a whole technical response in every police force. As long as you can have access to capability, draw it down when it's needed, and you get those efficiencies and economies of scale. So I would certainly push for a regional model, if not a national model. But what I won't do is mitigate or compromise on neighbourhood policing.
Okay,
we need that.
Thank you. Very clear answer. Yes, sir, you at the back.
Hans van Leeuwen from the Australian High Commission.
Oh, Hans, hi, sorry, I can't see you that one.
I was just wondering, there's a sort of a theory that's been developed by some academics about the crime, increasingly recently about the crime-terrorism nexus, and particularly with some of the European attacks, and also we saw it with Salman Abedi in Manchester.
Yeah.
What's your feeling about the sort of strength of the link between those who are vulnerable or plotting and engagement in other forms of crime, organised crime, gang crime, etc., within the communities you mentioned?
I don't think they have to be criminals before they become terrorists. But I think that on that journey where there's a disrespect and disregard for law, and there's an inherent dishonesty or badness within these people, I think that's there. Sometimes that will mean they're fallen into crime. I think what I'm saying is, despite them saying that they are religious people and they want to show their service to the Almighty, what I'm saying is, I think they're bad people and evil people, so they will commit crime as well as terrorism. And I think the sort of crime that they would commit is abuse and dishonest based. So abusing females as well as stealing and violence.
Jenna McGrath, Canadian High Commission, Madame Mubarak.
Oh.
I just wanted to know what you think the role of government and policing service has in changing or shifting identities within the people that are vulnerable. Obviously, the problem is that there is only a singular identity, and what we want to hope it for is multiple identities and ensuring that Britishness comes up first.
Yeah.
What role do you think that government services has in that?
I think that's a huge role to play. I mean, one of the things that probably not a very popular thing to say, but one of the things that I don't agree with is this notion of multiculturalism, because all that's led into is like islands of people just living amongst their own people, and I'm not blaming anybody here, but striving to meet their needs. We have built their local shop, their local supermarket in there, their local amenities in there, their recreation, their school, which means they haven't come out, and all we've got this wonderful tapestry of rich diversity, but it's not integrated. It hasn't moved, and I can't see it moving unless government intervention comes in there, or where the public services change. So I think there's a role for that, and I think the way to get into that is through the health arena, through education, a little bit through policing, but I think we can make an impact around that, if that answers your question. Thank you.
Yes, gentlemen, yeah, please.
Good afternoon, Fraser Allen from the MOD. You talked about providing greater institutional support to Muslim leaders that we would wish to maybe speak out more to counter intimidation that they may not get. Can you just unpack what are some pretty well established, well recognised organisations?
Not necessarily legal. I think moral support, vocal support, coming out in support of them, get behind them. So if somebody says, actually, we need to have a look at them, we need to be introspective, we need to examine what's going on in our own backyard, and we need to be honest about it because terrorism is germinating within Muslim communities, they can expect a barrage of attack, from all different directions. But if they said that, if the whole country got behind them and said, actually, this guy or this woman is saying something half reasonable, if you've got some role models involved in that, if you've got some authoritative voices saying, actually, this is reasonable, that's the sort of support I think is needed. Well, that's the sort of support I would have wanted last year, this time, when it happened to me, because it can be a pretty lonely place, as opposed to legal remedies, because legal remedies can just go into disputes and it becomes difficult and tense. But that's the sort of thing. But more so from Muslim voices themselves to say it, because they will just discount. If you're not Muslim, they'll just discount it. Oh, you're going to say that. You're from the West, you're white, you're this. You don't understand what it's like. We're in a different environment. It has to be an upsurge in Muslim communities to say that themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that's in the wake of 9/11. Within the UK intelligence community, we said very early on there needs to be a dialogue between the British government and Islamic communities. There also needs to be a dialogue by Islamic communities with themselves.
Yes,
they need to be talking to each other as much as the government needs to be talking to them. The two things need to happen. I mean, in that context, has anybody else got any immediate questions? Because if not, there's one I'd like to ask, which is, I think it's 3 years ago now, President Fattah al-Sisi of Egypt made what at the time seemed to me a very significant speech in which he said, the global image of Islam is awful. It's all about extremist, literalist interpretations of the Quran. It's about declarations of takfir. It's about beheadings, etc., etc. How do we turn this around? How do we actually promote a more positive, humane concept and perception of Islam, which, as we all know, is there. It has been there, and since that point, to those not in the Ummah, not as perhaps well situated to judge, it doesn't seem as if a whole lot's happened. But I just wonder what your thinking is on that.
I think if anything, it's progressively gone downhill. The reputation of Muslim communities, and it breaks my heart to say that, as a very proud and devout Muslim person with an Islamic family. But if you have a look at, if you describe yourself as Muslim, what sort of, if we're really honest, what sort of impression is that going to give to a person that doesn't understand the religion?
Yeah.
And I don't expect everyone to understand Islam, but the first thing that's going to come in mind is quite a strict adherence to old rules, quite a rejection of Western idealism, quite an oppressive attitude towards women and their rights. And that's before you get onto some of the violence that's been played out in the media. So, if you've got a religious duty and you love your religion, as Muslims, I would say, reclaim it, take it back. Yeah. And there's more silence out there than in here when I do say that. Okay, we'll do it.
Okay, all right.
Well, time's come to do it.
Yeah, indeed. Okay.
What they need is a strong Muslim leader.
Yeah.
And if you can't find one, then I'll do the job.
It sounds to me, Commander, as if you've just identified your post-retirement career path. There's clearly a need for it.
Strong and stable.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely. Yes. A conversation with which a certain aspirant Prime Minister will just have had with the Queen within the last hour. And on that note, I think that's an appropriate moment to bring this discussion to a close. I think it has been very fascinating. It's opened up, as I said, a very rich picture of what are the government, policing, security and cultural challenges in this country. And that definition, that texture, I think, is very important, necessary, and often lacking in the debate. So I hope that this is the first time that you've spoken here. I very much hope it will not be the last time that you come and speak to us. And I'd like to ask you all to join me in thanking our speaker for a very